Good morning. How's everyone doing? Good. All right, it is day 3 of South by. It is the day after daylight savings time. I think we have all earned a big collective deep breath. All right, so let's breathe in together. And let's breathe out. All right, who's ready to have some conflict? All right, you may know me, but just in case you don't, my name is Amy Gallo. I wrote this book called Getting Along, How to Deal with Anyone, Even Difficult People. And I'm also the co-host of a podcast called Women at Work, put out by Harvard Business Review. And I am a contributing editor at Harvard Business Review. I am also a big fan of this. Does anyone know what this is? It's a balance board. How many people have tried one of these out? Okay. Good, a good number of you. For those who don't know what the heck this is basically the top of a skateboard, right? No wheels or anything, as you can see, and then it's on a cylinder. And the goal is to try to balance on it. You use your legs, you use your abs, and you try to stay up on it. I'm a fan of it, but I have to tell you, I wasn't particularly good at it when I first started. And my daughter and husband, who are both surfers, were really good at it. And there became a family hobby, really a pastime, where they would watch me try to balance on this and laugh hysterically. Wasn't very nice. Now, for those of you who've tried it out, how many of you would say you're good at it? Okay, 2 people here, all right, fair enough. It is something most people are bad at. It's hard to figure out. And the family pastime, the joke became, how long can mom stay up on this? 8 seconds. That was it. That was the longest I could stay up. I would balance, slip, balance, slip. Now, luckily, you can put these sort of safety things on it where you don't actually fall. So I wasn't on the ground, but I was definitely not balancing. So last summer, I decided I'm going to get good at this. What is it, 1,000 hours of something you do? You can master it. I was like, I'm putting in the hours. And I spend all the time on that thing, slipping, on that thing, slipping. And finally, my daughter, who was 16 at the time, walked by and said, by the way, you know you're not trying to balance, right? I said, okay. She said, you're trying to recover from imbalance. Light bulb moment, right? It wasn't about trying to be perfectly in balance. It was allowing the slip and then recovering, right? Totally different story. So how does this relate to team conflict? How does this relate to drama on the teams that you work with? The reality is most of us strive to have a perfect team, a team that gets along, where there are no disagreements, where there's no conflict. But that's not what you want. What you want is a team that can recover from imbalance. You want a team that has disagreements, that has fights, that has conflicts, that doesn't always see eye to eye, but knows how to bounce back from those moments of tension. Because the reality is, we all get off kilter sometimes. Teams get off kilter. And these are 2 extremes that I'm showing you here, right? On the one hand, we have artificial harmony. This is a term I borrow from Patrick Lencioni, who wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of Teams. And that's where you act like you get along. People are smiling, they're nodding, they're very polite to one another. Think about those cultures, maybe you work in one of them, where people are really, really nice. But underneath the surface, there are simmering tensions, resentments, unvoiced opinions, disagreements. It's not a good place to be. Now, on the other extreme, you have a team that is embroiled in conflict, fight all the time, right? Neither of these are good. And I'll be honest, I see teams much more often in the artificial harmony than I see them in the all-out brawls, right? But again, neither is better. Neither is pleasant, all right? What you want is a team that can recover. Because the reality is there are going to be fights on a team. It is a natural, inevitable part of interacting with other humans that we will have disagreements, that we won't see eye to eye, that we'll disagree about how we should communicate, what the project plan should be, what our vision is, what's our mission. And you want to welcome those disagreements. Now, show of hands, how many people in here manage other people? Your people, wow, okay, that's great. So I have some bad news for you all. And that is that when there is conflict on a team, you are the ones that are primarily responsible for handling it. You may get some assistance from the person who manages you, your boss. You may get some assistance maybe from HR if things get really sticky. But chances are it relies on you. Now, here's the good news. I'm going to share some tactics that you can use to help your team recover from those moments, to lay the groundwork for this team resiliency. Now, for those of you who didn't raise your hand, I also have some good news for you. Number one, you're off the hook. No, just kidding. You're not, actually. You have a responsibility as well to help the team build resilience, because teams are made up of a collective of individuals. And each of those individuals influences the team culture, influences how you recover from moments of conflict, how you navigate disagreements. So you don't have to be the most powerful person in the room. You don't have to have the most senior title. You simply have to care. And you simply have to do your part to help the team find that balance when they've lost it. Now, when a conflict does come up, before I get to the tactics, I do actually want to make this clear. When a conflict comes up, it often feels like this. It's unclear, it's messy, are things blue or red? What are we disagreeing about? Do we actually like each other? Is this all that one person's fault? Right, what's the drama here? And I do want to make a distinction, and it's a bit of an artificial distinction, I'll be honest, but between what I think of as healthy conflict. This is conflict that moves a team toward its goals, that helps it achieve its targets, right? It is a good tension to have. Even in the moment, if it feels like it's sucking up time and wasting energy, ultimately you know if we can get through this, we will be better. And here are a few questions to ask yourself. If you're wondering, right, am I in this healthy conflict? Is this actually a good, productive thing? Is this helping you make a better decision? Is this helping you move toward your goal? Is this helping you have stronger work relationships? Right? That's what I consider healthy conflict. On the other hand, we have, well, actually, before I get to the other hand, let me just tell you some of the good things that come out of conflict. Some of the good things that create that healthy conflict, which are the natural tensions that come up on a team, right? These are just a handful of the tensions that you likely navigate as a team. And let's take this first one, speed versus quality. Have you ever worked on a team where there was someone who was so efficient, they moved so fast, you were sort of amazed by how quickly they could get things done, how quickly their mind moved, and they pushed the team to move faster and faster and faster. And on that same team, maybe you had someone who cared a lot about quality and didn't care how long it took, as long as they were producing the best possible outcome, right? Those two people on a team, it can feel really uncomfortable. It can feel like you're having conflicts and fights and disagreements. But the reality is those two people, that tension between them is good. You want someone to push for speed. You want someone to push for equality, right? And at the same time, you want someone who cares about the details, whereas there's someone who constantly pulls back and says, what's the big picture here? Or you want someone who cares about innovation, constantly trying new things, and someone who's like, no, we've got this already. We've got the capabilities we need. These tensions are healthy, and they're especially healthy when they don't become about the person, right? Amy only cares about speed. Amy only cares about quality. This is a tension you want people to navigate. And the tactics I'm going to share in just a few moments are going to help you figure out how to both identify those tensions, raise those tensions, and then navigate them. Okay, now I said on the other hand, you have got unnecessary conflict. And when I say unnecessary, this is the drama. This is the conflict that gets in the way, does not help you achieve your goals, but actually drags you all down. And here are some of the things that cause that unnecessary conflict, right? We've got communication differences. You have some people on your team who think you guys should just Slack everything, people who rely on email, people who like to present in a PowerPoint, people who don't like to use slides at all, people who think we should be short and efficient in our communication, and people who think we should take extra words to be polite and kind. Those are going to create some tension on the team that can often suck the air out of the room, make things harder for you. Also, unclear expectations, opaque performance standards. These are going to cause this unnecessary conflict because these are things you can quickly fix by making clear, here's how we communicate. Here are the expectations. Here are the standards we're holding ourselves against. Now, I mentioned a minute ago that this was sort of an artificial distinction between this unhealthy or healthy and unnecessary conflict. And that's because you can imagine that some conflicts over these things can actually be productive. If there's a conflict that comes up because the performance standards are opaque, and now you have to hash them out, you've actually helped the team be clearer about what they're holding themselves to. How are they holding themselves accountable? But as a manager, which the majority of you are, you have to look at these 4 things and make sure that by not making these things clear, by not providing these things for the team, you haven't created that unnecessary conflict. Now, how do you find the balance? How do you get back to that moment of recovery, resiliency? How do you make sure you have more healthy conflict than you do unnecessary conflict? I'm going to share 5 tactics for you on how to do this. And I want to remind those of you who are not managers that you don't necessarily have to have the power on a team. You don't have to make the call about how the team spends the time to do some of these things. You'll see you can do them as well. All right, tactic number 1, you want to make peace with conflict. What do I mean about that? All of us have a story about what conflict means, about whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether to avoid it, whether to lean into it. The more that you accept that conflict is a normal, inevitable part of a team interacting, the better you'll be able to handle it. And this is in large part not only because it'll make you feel better if you can make peace with it, but also because of something called mirror neurons. Because if you as the manager, or you as anyone in the room, when a fight starts to happen, when people say, I don't see it that way, actually, you're off base. That's not what the evidence shows. That's not what the results of the survey showed. And you start to tense up, or shut down, or look at your desk, or at the table in front of you, or you start fidgeting, right? Immediately everyone else in the room is go, oh gosh, this is uncomfortable. Whereas if you are calm, maybe engaged, right? You display comfortable body language, the chances are people are going to be more comfortable with that disagreement. So how do you do that? How do you make peace with conflict? I'll share a few tactics here. Number 1, put away the need to be liked. I know, it is human nature. I want you all to like me, trust me, right? But if you are laser focused on being liked, then you're missing out on the chance to be respected. Because sometimes on a team, you have to do things that are unpopular. And you, instead of trying to be liked, you're going to engage in a conflict that maybe will garner you respect, but not necessarily likability. You also want to focus on the big picture. I think one of the things I see teams do most often is get extremely focused on the short term. How do we make things comfortable? How do we move things along? How do things move along smoothly? And we think of conflicts as slowing us down, as distracting us from our goals. But remember those questions about healthy conflict. Sometimes those conflicts move us forward. So focus on the big picture. What is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? What disagreements do we need to have? What tensions do we need to navigate to get there? Accepting that conflict is part of that process, is part of that big picture, will help you. And then lastly, I don't want you to confuse disagreements with unkindness. I've worked in organizations where when someone says, I don't agree, it's as if they said, I hate all of you, I can't wait to get out of here. Right? That's not true. I don't agree is a difference of opinion. We need to get away from how we think about conflict. And you'll notice I use that word a lot. Most of us think of conflict as a terrible, unpleasant thing. But I think of it as dissent, debate. Remember how fun it is to debate ideas, to get our opinions out there, to hash out what is best for this team, for this project. That can be fun. We have to restore the fun to these disagreements, right? And we have to not take it so personally. So that's tactic number one. Tactic number two, get to know each other. Do you know who I'm really good at having conflicts with and then moving on with? People I like. Right? And that's not to say you're gonna like everyone on the team. I wrote a book about difficult people. I know you're not gonna like everyone on the team, and that's okay. But you really do need to get to know one another. There's something called the mere exposure effect. And the way I like to think of it is, have you ever heard a song where you're like, oh, that's a catchy song? And then you keep hearing it again, and you hear it again, and then like 6 months later, you're in a bar or a restaurant, and that song comes on, and you're like, I love this song. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, I don't love this song, I just know this song, right? That's what I mean about the exposure or the getting to know your teammates. The more you know them, the more we are predisposed to like them. Now, I'm sure you're thinking of like, that's not true. I have one colleague who I got to know really well, and the more I got to know them, that's fair. But the science shows us that if we know people, we're more likely to give them the benefit of the doubt. We're more likely to engage in what might be a difficult conversation and then move past it. So there's a couple ways to get to know one another. Just talk to each other. Ask each other questions. You don't have to ask, what did you do this weekend? Where were you born? What are your values? You don't have to go that deep. Just ask them, what do you think of this project? What did you think of that big decision that was made by our CEO? Right? Get to know how they think, what they care about. One team I worked with did this wonderful thing. They created user guides to themselves. So each member on the team wrote a user guide to Amy or to Peter or to Dan. Right? And that user guide said things like, hey, if you're planning a team dinner, I'm a vegetarian, please keep that in mind when you choose the restaurant. To, I've gotten feedback that I'm really curt in my emails. Please know I'm often answering emails as I'm putting my kids to bed. That's why I'm short, not because I'm rude. Right? Anything that could explain who you are, what you care about, that would help other people understand and interpret your behavior in a kind and generous way. So get to know each other. Now, the third tactic is to set norms. One of the biggest mistakes that we make as teams is that we get put on a project together, or we hire everyone, we start working together, and we just make a ton of assumptions. Well, of course they're going to communicate the way I do. Of course they think the same, we have the same goal, right? But we don't actually talk about how do we want to work with one another? How do we want to handle disagreements when they come up? Setting norms around conflict specifically can be enormously helpful because we actually don't often agree on how we are going to disagree. And instead, when a disagreement comes up, we get, most of us haven't made peace with conflict, so we get really nervous and upset, and that tension comes in, and it can be really hard. So here are some norms that I might suggest. These are just a few example ones, right? Which is we communicate openly and say what we mean and mean what we say, right? Can you agree as a team that that's a norm? Can you agree that you're gonna listen actively to one another, right? Can you agree that yes, sometimes we may disagree, but eventually we have to commit to what we're doing together. So I may not always get my way, but eventually I can commit to moving forward as a team, right? Can you do that? And I suggest, as a team, you actually create these together. Those of you who are managers, don't just set some norms and say, by the way, here are the norms, right? We all know if these are created as a collective, people are much more likely to adhere to them. All right, tactic number 4. A lot of drama on a team comes from gossip, right? How many people would say they gossiped about someone at work this week? Come on, be honest. Okay, no, really be honest. Okay, more and more hands are going up. I am guessing, actually, most of you have gossiped about someone at work. And that's because gossip simply is talking about someone when they aren't present, right? The problem is that we think of gossip as a negative. I'm talking meanly about someone. I'm saying that they're not capable. I'm disparaging their outfit or their skills, right? That's what we think of as gossip. But there are actually upsides to gossip. The research shows it helps us form bonds, right? It can help us gather information, especially people who don't have power in an organization. This is a good way for them to find out information. Maybe even have some influence over how things are shaped. There's also really interesting research that shows that it helps guide good behavior in an organization. So if me and my colleague Kelly are gossiping about our friend Dan, about our coworker Dan, and we're saying, you know what, he's really manipulative and he's dishonest, right? And another colleague of ours, Ruchika, hears us talking. She now knows, oh, it's not good what Dan's doing, right? And it helps to set norms. It's not helpful for Dan, let's be honest, but it's helpful for the rest of the team in that it establishes what is acceptable behavior and what is not. However, there are lots of downsides to gossip too, right? It can lead to hurt feelings. Who would love to find out that their colleagues were talking badly about them behind their back? Pretty much no one, right? It can also be a time suck. Sometimes there's misinformation, right? Did you hear that they're gonna cut that big project? And then there's all this noise in the system about whether they're gonna cut that big project, right? And then it also leads to confirmation bias. So if me and my colleague Kelly are talking about how Dan is manipulative, now everything Dan does seems manipulative because that's the lens that we're seeing it through. It becomes evidence of our belief. And when we bring in Ruchika to the conversation, right? She's like, oh yeah, Dan's manipulative, right? And we've created this narrative around him that may be true, but also may be unfair. So what do you do about gossip? Because it's gonna happen. First of all, research shows actually that most gossip is positive or neutral, right? I've talked about my colleagues' backs all the time. Did you hear so-and-so did this? Wasn't that great? Wasn't that helpful? Have you talked to so-and-so about this, right? We're talking about them all the time. Try to keep it positive. Try to keep it at least neutral because it's information sharing. It's a natural part of interacting with other humans. Be careful about where and how you do share information, especially if it's sensitive. If it's positive or neutral, you probably don't have to worry so much, but everything you say, particularly in writing, but also out loud, think about if that person heard me say this, how would they feel? Right? It is the golden rule, and it is so important. I think because so much of our communication happens in text, and I don't mean SMS, but I mean in the written text, we've deluded ourselves to believing that's private in some way, and it's not. Also know who you're talking to. Gossiping to the biggest gossip in the office is not a good idea. Trust me, they will eat it up. They will be so happy that you're feeding that rumor mill. But you have to know what you're gonna say is gonna get out to everyone. Another interesting thing about the research on gossip is it shows that we think it damages the reputation of the person we're speaking about, and actually we see that it reflects most negatively on the gossiper. So keep that in mind when you decide to engage in this conversation. Keep in mind that your reputation may be at stake, not just the person you're talking to. And then lastly, normalize direct feedback on your team. The more people can tell one another directly if they have an issue, if they have a concern, if they don't like the way the person is talking to them, or they're concerned about their relationship in some way, the less you have a need for gossip. One of my favorite things that you can do around gossip is when someone comes to you, because this is the thing, no one thinks they gossip, but they always are like, well, people come to me, what am I gonna do? I can't turn them away. Yeah, well, actually you can. And one of the things you can say is, when they say, I'm having an issue with Amy, first question, have you told Amy? Do you want me to help you think through how to talk to her about it? Right? Normalize direct feedback. Encourage others to do that. They may not take you up on the offer. They may go find the big gossip and say, well, I'll just talk to her. That's much easier. She actually will engage in it. That's okay. But at least you set the norm. I'm not going to be on the receiving end of this. And on our team, we talk to one another directly. And that's where those norms come in, right? All right, tactic number 5, double down on psychological safety. How many people here would say they know what the term psychological safety means? A few hands. I'm not calling on anyone, so you can lie, actually, if you want. But it's funny, this is a term I think 5 years ago, very few people knew what it was. And it's something that we're talking a lot about these days. How do we build psychological safety? And I'll share a definition with you, right? Which is, it is the shared belief that it's okay to take risks, express ideas and concerns, speak up with questions, and admit mistakes, all without fear of negative consequences. Now, I'm not talking about negative consequences like being fired. Yes, of course, that would be a fear. But I'm also talking about negative consequences of not getting that project you wanted to be assigned to, not getting the raise, garnering a reputation for being someone who's unreliable, or is a rabble-rouser, or just wants to create noise in the system, right? Those are the negative consequences. Now, you can see the benefits, the upsides, and actually, I'll just quickly share the origin of this term, team psychological safety. There's a professor named Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School, who in the 1990s, I see some of you nodding, maybe you know her. Her work is brilliant, I highly recommend it. In the 1990s, she was working on her dissertation, and she was looking at team effectiveness at teams in hospitals. And she had this presumption that the teams who rated highest on effectiveness would have the fewest mistakes. Right? Makes sense. You're a highly effective team, high-performing team. You don't make as many mistakes as the teams that are struggling. But when the data came back, it showed that the teams that were rated high on effectiveness actually had more mistakes than the teams that were rated low on effectiveness. Does anyone want to take a guess why? You can just shout it out. You know what? The shouting out's not working because I'm not hearing any of you. I'm just going to tell you. I'm sure some of you were right, by the way, because they were reporting the mistakes. Part of being an effective team was not being afraid of the consequences of actually admitting you had made a mistake. Did anyone guess that, by the way? Is that what anyone said? Yes, okay, good, thank you. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about psychological safety, the willingness to admit mistakes, to not hide them, to take risks. And I don't mean big risks, like we're gonna put out this product that no one has ever put out before. I mean small R risks, interpersonal risks. I'm gonna challenge someone in authority. I'm gonna disagree with my colleague. I'm gonna push, once we reach consensus, I'm gonna push us further to see if this discussion can go even more beyond where we've become, where we've landed. Now, the question about psychological safety, of course, is what is it? That's all good, Amy, right? But what is it made of? So we think of the psychological safety as having 3 pillars. The first is caring. We have one another's backs, right? Now, this caring doesn't mean you're best friends with the people that you work with. You go out on weekends, you have drinks together. It simply means you're invested in one another's success. You don't even have to like someone to be invested in their success, but you care. The second pillar is consistency. Remember that norm? We say what we mean and we mean what we say. You want to have people that you can rely on. I worked with someone years ago who we often talked about having 2 sides, right? There was the good Brad and there was the bad Brad. And we never knew which we were gonna get. And you could see all of us in the room, as soon as Brad started talking, looking at it, was like, are we getting good Brad or are we getting the bad Brad? It was incredibly damaging. It took up tons of time because we were using all of our cognitive resources to figure out which Brad we were getting. This is why consistency is important. It puts people at ease. It requires less of us in terms of what we need to figure out. Now, the third pillar is candor, right? And that is we say what we mean. And we're not afraid to deliver bad news. Now, I want you to take a moment right now and think about the team that you manage or the team that you work on, and think about these 3 pillars, and how would you rate them in terms of what you're best at? Because the thing is, these 3 pillars are also levers. So if you are really good at caring, that's excellent. But that means you need to get better at candor. And you can use them. You can leverage them to get better at one. So let's say you're not as good at candor. How do you convince the team that part of caring is being open and honest with one another? How do you dismantle this association between kindness, between caring, and disagreement? Right? You don't have to agree with one another in order to work together, in order to work well. All right. The other thing about psychological safety is because it's become sort of more and more talked about, there are a lot of misunderstandings about it. Number one, people think, oh, safety, I'm gonna feel comfortable, right? It's gonna make me, I'm gonna feel free to say what I want, no fear of consequences. The reality is when people are direct and honest and they say what they mean and mean what they say and they call out mistakes, and they're not afraid to deliver bad news, it's pretty darn uncomfortable. It can be deeply, deeply uncomfortable, but that's part of it. Part of it is getting through those tensions. Remember those tensions I shared, right? It's about navigating those tensions in a way that you can actually achieve your goals. The second misunderstanding is that we think it lets people off the hook. If anyone can say and do whatever they want, are we actually holding them accountable? Absolutely, yes. Psychological safety is not about giving people a soft landing. It's about holding them accountable to meeting their goals. Remember, all of this is not about in service of individuals, it's in service of a team. The phrase is team psychological safety, and it's something that everyone has to feel on the team. I'll talk about that in a moment. But I also want to talk about this third misunderstanding, which is people like, how do I get this? I want psychological safety. What course can we go through? Right? Can I get the certificate on my wall that says our team is psychologically safe? No, you cannot. Right? It is something you're constantly building. You're constantly striving toward. And here's the bummer about psychological safety, that it is very, very hard to build and very, very easy to break. And that's what I want to talk about here, because I think one of the things, when you think about how to build it, there's a lot you can do. And again, you don't have to be the most senior person in the room to do this. Anyone can take these steps, right? And first, and I think this is really important, is that you have to agree that everyone makes mistakes. One of the most comforting things that my mom has ever said to me was I called her because I had purchased something, I'm hoping this has happened to all of you, on Instagram for $20, and it never showed up. It was only $20, but I was like, oh man, I'm a grown woman, and I called my mom to complain about being duped on Instagram, right? It wasn't a proud moment, but she said, Amy, you are not the first person to make a $20 mistake, right? You are not the first person. I want you to remember that phrase because you will be surrounded by people who are making mistakes. And how you respond to that, whether you're their manager or their peer, you're not the first person to make this mistake. And you probably won't be the last, right? We want to normalize those mistakes. And when mistakes happen, rather than figuring out whose fault was this, who's going to be held accountable, which is maybe important depending on the size of the mistake, you want to replace that with curiosity. What happened? What could we do differently? I worked for a manager years ago who was a pretty good manager, I will say, but she was a little bit harsh sometimes. Her feedback was very direct. I thought she had very high standards, and she held us to them. She was a pleasure to work for, but you certainly were a bit guarded around her. I had taken a risk and encouraged our team to invest in a project that took a lot of time. And I really thought this was going to be the next best thing for our team. We all put time and effort into it, and about halfway into the project, I realized, ooh, this is not going to deliver the results I thought it was. And I had been really clear that I thought it would. And I knew I had to go tell this manager sooner rather than later what I was noticing in the data, that this was not going to recoup its investment, that we might need to pull the plug on this project. I got into a conference room with her. I can picture this conference room perfectly. Her chair was turquoise. And she had a sort of stern look on her face, which sometimes she did. It was fine. And I sort of laid out my spiel. I had practiced it many times. And she said, so what did we learn? What an amazing question, right? What did we learn? Not, why did this happen? Why did you think we should do this? Why didn't you notice this sooner? Why did you take that risk? No, what did we learn? Now, to be fair, I did get held accountable, right? That also came in. But her first question was about learning, not about execution. And that was incredibly, incredibly helpful. And lastly, as a leader especially, you have to admit that you are fallible. You have to admit that you too make mistakes. And you have to hold your opinions lightly. And by that I mean you have to be open-minded. Not that you're gonna sort of hedge and say, well, I don't know if I really believe this or not. Of course you believe this, but how about I believe this, but if someone has a difference of opinion, I'm open to hearing it. Right? That's what you want, is open-mindedness. Now, there are moments that we encourage this sort of psychological safety, but what ends up happening is people sort of fake it. They're like, yeah, it's safe here, yep. And these are the things you want to watch out for, especially as managers, and these are things you can watch out for others doing, and even hopefully call them out so they can correct it. Number one, don't pretend to be uncertain to solicit feedback. If you know what direction you want the team to go in, don't go into a meeting going, what direction do you think we should go in? Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, we're gonna go this direction, right? We've all had people who've done that. Don't pretend to be uncertain. And don't ask for feedback if you have no intention of listening to it or doing anything with it. All right, I love when I work with leaders and I'm like, you need to solicit feedback. Most important thing you can do is ask people for feedback. And they say, yeah, I did. And I'm like, what'd you hear? They're like, I don't know. I wasn't really listening. Right, or I got this feedback. Okay, what are you gonna do about it? Nothing, I actually don't think it's right. Okay, don't ask for that feedback. Similarly, don't welcome input only if it makes you retain power. Right? So many leaders say, we want input, we want to hear from you, but we don't want to hear anything that actually challenges the power structure here. We don't want to hear anything that might sort of make us all question whether we're headed in the right direction. When I say we want input, it's about really small things, like maybe the size of the font, right? Make sure that you're actually open to hearing challenging opinions. You are not going to get psychological safety if people believe you only want one type of feedback. The other mistake that people often make is allowing failure, but only allowing failure from certain people. Typically people who look like them, right? Oftentimes, with psychological safety, when we think about whether people feel it in a team, there might be 2 or 3 people. Usually the boss's favorites who think, oh yeah, I feel totally safe to take risks. I can say whatever I want. But remember that definition, it is a shared belief. For the team to have it, the entire team has to feel it. And one of the best things you can do is measure whether the person with the least power on the team, and least power because of their position or because of their identity, measure whether that person feels psychologically safe. And if they don't, figure out what needs to change, because that's going to benefit the whole team. So when I say you want psychological safety, I mean genuine psychological safety. Here's a summary of the tactics. I know everyone loves a picture of the summary of the tactics. This is your moment. Remember, you're going to make peace with conflict. You're going to get to know one another. Give one another the benefit of the doubt. You're going to set norms for how we disagree. We're going to agree on how we disagree. We're going to right-size gossip so that it doesn't cause drama on the team, cause a lot of that unnecessary conflict. And then we're going to double down on psychological safety. Now, those are things that you can do in your spare time, right? But what if you're having a conflict right now? And I suspect some of you came to this session because you're thinking, I have a conflict on my team, what do I do? So I want to give you a little bit of advice about what to do when the conflict actually comes up. Number one, all that work you did on those other 5 tactics are going to help, right? They're going to help you all recover. But the big question for many managers, and for anyone who might be drawn into a conflict, is should I get involved? Right? Is it my role to actually help facilitate a resolution? And I want you to ask yourself, is the conflict unhealthy in some way? Is someone being harmed? Because that's absolutely a reason to get involved, right? And most importantly, do you have the skills to help? A lot of times we want to escalate a conflict to a manager or to a boss or even to someone in HR, and they don't actually know how to facilitate an outcome that will be beneficial for everyone. If you do have the skills, if there is an unhealthy tenor to this, yes, absolutely get involved. Maybe you can set clearer expectations. Maybe you can make the performance standards less opaque. Maybe you can do something that can help turn that conflict into something that's unnecessary, that's something that's healthier, right? My sort of rule of thumb is that conflicts are best resolved at the level that they happen. If you escalate a conflict to the next level up, you're gonna have to escalate every future conflict, right? You need to learn the skills to be able to resolve those conflicts. So as a manager, part of your job is to resist getting involved in every team conflict and letting those people build the skills they need to navigate it. Now, you might provide an intense amount of coaching, and I hope you will, to help the team get through that, but you don't necessarily need to get involved. Now, if it involves many people on the team, you may need to shift the tone of the conflict. Again, remember the goal is to move from unhealthy or unnecessary conflict to healthy conflict, something that helps us achieve our goals. So number one, always take a break. When things get heated, when it feels really messy, when people are saying things you're like, ooh, I think they're gonna regret that later, right? Take 5 minutes. Agree that you're gonna come back to it tomorrow. But don't say, let's take a break and never return to it, right? You actually have to come back to it. You also can ask questions, curious questions, not why are you being such a jerk, right? That's not gonna help anyone. But questions like, wait, tell me what's underlying that thought, that belief. What is most concerning to you here? If you had complete say in how this sort of carried out, what would you do? Right? Just trying to get people to start articulating what's underneath the conflict. And oftentimes what you'll see is that it's often one of those tensions. It's one of those important tensions on a team that people are having. And if you can highlight that, if you can try to depersonalize it, take it away from the personalities and focus on the issue, it's going to shift that tone. You also want to remind everyone of a shared goal. Oftentimes what happens when there's a team conflict, people start to get into factions, right? I'm on this person's side, I'm on that person's side, or there's 3 different units here that are really going at it. And if you can remind everyone, remember, we all want X. And X may be to get this project done on time, to look good to the senior leadership team, to make this client happy. That starts to get everyone feeling like they're on the same team again. And you might have to remind them quite regularly, and that's okay. But you want them to come back. And you might name one of those tensions that they're having, right? You might say, I think this is a disagreement over how quickly we move or how high quality the end product is. That's a good tension to have. Let's talk about the trade-offs. Let's talk about why we would want to go in one direction or another. And then lastly, take a break again if things get really heated. You might say, let's come back to this tomorrow. It's amazing how much people care less the next day. All right. Then, when you get through that conflict, take a moment to reflect and recover. What did we learn? Right? You might even say, you know what, yesterday was a tough meeting. We actually had a really big disagreement. What did we learn? Right? This now feeds into your norms. And if you have the norms set, you can go, great, do we need to revise any of them based on what we learned? Now, I will tell you all of this that I'm asking you to do, to be calm, to direct your team, to have healthy conflict, to have enough sort of emotional presence in the moment to redirect the conversation is so hard to do when you are stressed, when you are tired, when you're overwhelmed, when you're under pressure, and when you are moving at the speed of light. How many people believe they will work on a fast-paced team? Yeah. Most of us feel like we're under time pressure these days. And that's possibly very true. But I would also argue that a lot of the hurry up, get this done is artificial. It's of our own creating. And I think if we want to be able to do any of this work around how we interact, around supporting the team, to have less drama and more healthy conflict, we have to take care of ourselves. Because it's not just teams that get out of balance. It's also individuals. And I'm going to tell you a story about this quote here. In the fall, I was having some health issues. I was supposed to go on this big tour in the UK. It was a 10-day-long tour around my book. And I remember calling my friend Lisa 2 days before I was going. I was like, I'm sick. I don't feel good. I think I need to cancel the tour. She said, okay, tell me what you're worried about. And I listed all the things. I said, I'm worried I'm going to get there, and the hotel room is not going to be comfortable, and then I'm going to feel terrible, and I'm not going to have anyone who's going to be able to help me if I feel sick, and I'm going to disappoint the clients, and my speaking agent is then going to drop me, and then I'm going to be destitute, and my daughter will grow up without a mother. I mean, I was going on and on. And this is what she said to me. Amy, anxiety is a liar. And I want you to remember that because conflict makes so many of us anxious. And it will tell us, I'm a terrible manager. I don't know how to do this. The team is going to hate me. The team will never recover from this. The project is going to fail. And that is most likely a lie. So ask yourself, okay, if I wasn't anxious, if I wasn't calm, call your friend Lisa. We all have a friend Lisa. Because you know what she told me? She said, just get on the plane. You can always come home. And she was right. I got on the plane, and I made the decision getting off the plane. Am I going home or am I staying? No, I'm staying. Okay. I got to my toe. Okay, am I staying or am I going home? Okay, I'm staying. Right? And every step of the way, I got to make the choice. I was in control. Anxiety wasn't. And that's what I want you all to do as you are navigating these moments. Right? I want you to throw yourselves a metaphorical life preserver in the form of pausing and asking yourself, what is actually true? Because conflict is going to make us feel uncomfortable, but we have to work through that in order to get to the good stuff that's on the other side. And you will most certainly get there. All right. Before I get to questions, and we do have a few minutes for questions. Oh, I was supposed to tell you, you're supposed to use your app to ask questions. Hopefully some of you already have. Pull it up if you have questions. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you I am offering a raffle, 2 sets of signed books. I have my HBR Guide to Dealing with Conflict, the latest one, which is Getting Along. I also am going to throw in a third one. We've done some books based on the Women at Work podcast. So I will send a set of 3 signed books. If you just text this number, sign up for my newsletter, you will be entered in the raffle, and I'll let you know if you win. Okay, now, questions. And it looks like you did enter some, so you can bring those up. There we go. All right. As a leader, how do you manage conflict when employees come to you saying that they have an issue with someone, but they don't want you to intervene? This is a good question, but I will have to say it's sort of the best possible scenario because you don't necessarily want to intervene. chances are those people can probably solve that on their own. This is where you come into coaching, and I'll just give you a quick coaching tool that you can use. All right, there's 4 steps and this is actually from my first book, The HBR Guide to Dealing with Conflict, which is that you first want to ask, what's going on with the other person? What do you think they care about? What do you think they think about the situation? Because chances are, if someone's having an issue with someone, they're getting focused on themselves. So ask them about the other person. Second, ask what's at stake. What are you actually disagreeing about? Third, ask what is your goal? What do you want out of this? And then considering those 3 things, what do you actually want to do? What are the pros and cons of different approaches? Okay, go try this and then report back. So I think that it's hard when they don't want you to get involved, but they want you to solve it. But that's a coaching opportunity. So thank you for that question. Okay, Ranja asks, team members may have a different notion whether a conflict is solved or not, and bring it up weeks after again. Do you have a tip on how to navigate this? Yes. This is a really important question because sometimes conflict is in the eye of the beholder. Disagreements are in the eye of the beholder, and they can go on and on for time. And some people think it's resolved, we're moving on, and some people think, no, not yet, right? And they keep bringing it up. It's important, I think, actually to put an end point on your conflict, to say, okay, we disagreed about X, and this is where the tensions can be really helpful. If you can name the conflict, this is what we're disagreeing about, this is what we're making trade-offs on, right? If you can do that, then you can say, okay, we've reached a resolution. Here's what the conclusion is. Is everyone on board with that, right? That's where that norm, disagree, then commit, right? And you can even say, you brought this up several times, and I understand it doesn't feel resolved to you, but we have to move on. This is the resolution. And it's important. Sometimes people ask questions about a conflict or about a disagreement because they don't actually like the resolution. So sometimes they're bringing it up because they're like, I'm not happy with it. So they're asking, we're like, oh, did we resolve that? And it's like, yeah, of course we did. Right? So you have to make that very clear. And again, if you have that norm, disagree, then commit, that will be much easier. All right, we have time for a couple more questions. Leonardo asks, what advice would you give to improve relations without trying to fix someone's behavior when people are very different? Oh, I love this question, and I'll tell you why, because so often I have people come to me and saying, you will not believe what this other person did. And they tell me what they did, and they're like, isn't that horribly inappropriate? And sometimes I think it's inappropriate, but I'm thinking, well, that person doesn't think it's inappropriate, right? And you have to remember, and you have to remind people that your perspective is just one perspective. And while you believe that's not an appropriate way to communicate or to act in the workplace, someone else might. They come from a different culture. They were raised differently than you. They probably had 4 other different jobs than you before they came here, in which perhaps that was a normal thing to do. It was an acceptable thing to do. You have to remember there's this social psychology concept called naive realism, which is that we think we see things absolutely clearly, right? The chairs in this room are black. And if someone came in and said, no, they're really, really deep gray, I'd go, you're wrong. Misinformed, right? Because I believe those chairs are black. And so you have to remember, you're just seeing things when you see things and you become certain that they're that way, and someone sees it differently, we presume that they're wrong. So you have to help people understand your perspective is just one perspective. It's valid, yes, but you do not have to have a shared worldview with the people you work with in order to move forward. You just have to have an agreement about how you're going to treat one another, how you're going to handle conflicts when they come up, and how you're going to achieve your goals together. So this isn't about fixing someone, right? This is about helping people understand there's different ways to approach a problem. There's different ways to communicate. And not all of them are acceptable. I'm not saying that there's no norms, right? But if you have those norms, then you can refer to them, right? And remember, oftentimes bias plays a really big role when we perceive someone else's behavior as negative, right? Oftentimes it's simply not what we expect, or it's not what we like. So that behavior may be okay, just not in our perspective. And what is it if you can describe the impact it's having, how do you change the impact it's having rather than trying to fix the behavior? My book, Getting Along, will really help with that question, Leonardo, so thank you for that one. All right, last question. What do you do if your manager likes to avoid conflict, and so all of the conflict is under the table on the team? I did say that you don't have to be the most powerful person in the room to do all of this. It is very helpful if you are, and it is incredibly difficult if you have a manager who is just shutting down conflict all the time. That said, there is some of this you can do. And I've actually worked on a team where I was not the leader. I was just a team member of the team, an individual contributor. And I said, hey, could we set norms on this team? And you know what the manager said? Yes, please, would you lead that? Right? Because they didn't want to do it. They didn't know how to do it. So you can volunteer and say, hey, you know, I think we need to figure out how to handle disagreements. They're going to come up. It's normal. Can I help the team set some norms around that? Can I run a meeting where we discuss what those are? The research shows that the team defaults to the conflict style of the senior-most person, of the leader of the team. So it is a challenge, to be sure. But if you can set the norms, if you can start to get to know one another, and you can model healthy, constructive disagreement, right, you can actually change the tone of that team. The other thing is you might even ask the manager, if you have a good relationship with your boss, you might even give them feedback, say, you know, I feel like our team is in this thing called artificial harmony. You might even give them Patrick Lencioni's book, right? I really think it would be helpful if we got better at learning to disagree. What do you think? Right? Not necessarily an easy conversation. And as someone who avoids conflict, they might say, oh yeah, great idea, and then do nothing about it. But at least you've shown them that this is something you want to do. All right, I lied. We're going to do one more because we got time. Okay, how do you get through paralysis in a group of partners who are in a pattern of artificial harmony? This is a scenario when no one speaks up. So people often ask me, what are the signs that we're in our artificial harmony? And I say, are your meetings full of nods and silence? Right? That is the artificial harmony. So I have sympathy. Troy asked this question. I have sympathy for this paralysis. There's another conflict expert named Jennifer Goldman-Wetzler, and she talks about how moving beyond conflict, you need to take a pattern-breaking action. And that means doing something very different than the group might expect. And it's a risk, right? This is where that small r, interpersonal risk, comes up. And you might say, I'm going to do something really countercultural here, but I'm just going to propose this, right? Or I'm going to do something here and just sort of, I know we're reaching consensus, but I'm going to throw a wrench in the system. Can we talk about it? The first few times you might be met with total silence, and that's okay, but you want to keep at it. Keep sort of trying to move that forward. And if you take that risk, you might see, like that manager who told me, yes, please create the norms, you might see that the other people in the room are like, oh, thank God, right? Because oftentimes many people are frustrated with this artificial harmony, but they don't know what to do to get out of it. So take that pattern-breaking action, just one step, that will help the team sort of rethink how they're working, that may break them out of that paralysis. Okay, that was genuinely the last question. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.